Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Calgary Marketing Association first webinar of the fall series. My name is Jan. I am with the Calgary Marketing Association, and of course, joining me here today is Marc Binkley. Welcome, Marc.
Hi, thanks. I'm just watching all the names coming in. It's good
I
to see
know.
everybody.
So yeah, we have close to 200 registrants as of about 11 o'clock this morning. So let's give everybody a minute just to get logged on, and then I will formally introduce you, Marc, and hand things over to you.
Sounds good.
Okay, so just a little bit of housekeeping while everyone's loading on. First of all, thank you, all of our attendees, for joining us, and a special thanks goes out to our members for staying with us and staying involved throughout the summer and throughout all of this interesting times during COVID-19. And a special thanks I would like to send out to our corporate partners who make all of these webinars and events and presentations possible. So thank you very much to our platinum partners, Canada Post and Calgary Economic Development. And thank you to our gold partners, ATB, DAC Group, Vovia, and Post Media Solutions. So thanks to all of you for once again making this possible. So Marc, our presentation today is called Share of Triggers, a new way to measure brand campaigns. And I think what I'll do now is just read your bio and then hand the controls over to you.
Thanks.
All right, so your official title is Managing Director and Director of Digital Marketing Strategy at Anstis Communications. Marc spent 3 years as the local media manager for Sports Check and Atmosphere before progressing to the manager of digital strategy, analytics, and paid search. He played a pivotal role in furthering the Canadian Tire initiative of digitalizing the retail shopping experience, mapping customer journeys, leading real-time marketing campaigns, developing content marketing strategies, initiating the data science program, designing attribution models, media mix tests, and linking digital ads to both offline and online sales. And because of all that, Marc's work has been recognized and awarded for excellence around the world in multiple categories. And I am proud to say that, of course, Marc is a member of our Calgary Marketing Association Board of Directors. So welcome again, Marc, and thank you for taking time out to present this presentation and your findings around it, because I know you're a very, very busy person.
No problem.
Okay, so I'm just going to hand it over to you now. Folks,
For sure.
Just like to remind you this webinar is being recorded, and we are accepting Q&As. So please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A area. You just click on the bottom of your screen and type away. We will do our best to get to all of your questions, either as Marc presents, and of course at the end we'll leave time for Q&A. And over to you, Marc.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I'm just kind of looking at all these names. It's really cool to see all these people here that I know. So thanks for jumping in. And if we haven't met yet, hi, I'm Marc. I'm really excited to present this information to you guys. I'm really passionate about what I'm going to talk about today, which is called Share of Triggers. And let me just flip over. So yeah, Share of Triggers is a better way to measure brand campaigns. For anyone that knows me, you know that I like to try and build campaigns that don't suck. And, you know, easier said than done. There's lots of things that you can do that is really, really impactful in terms of getting a lot of reach, a lot of impressions, a lot of views. But it's the impressions and what they do in the market. It's the impact they make that I've always been trying to figure out how to solve for. So luckily, over the course of this past year and really over the course of the summer, I've done a lot of discovery and found this really cool way to help measure brand campaigns. I think is going to help everyone here. So feel free to, as Jan has mentioned, feel free to jump in and put any comments or questions in the Q&A, and I'll hopefully be able to get to them. Jan, can you just confirm if this screen is covering anything?
No, you're good.
Okay, very good. So like any good story, we've got a beginning and a middle and an end. I'll try and get to the bottom line right up front so that everybody who wants to just kind of chew on something has something to think about. There's a little bit of story I think we'll all kind of appreciate. I'll talk about the trouble of branding, what I think modern brand management really is. We'll get into the share of triggers framework, and then I've got some final thoughts for you. So the bottom line, there's a marketplace out there. It's full of people. It's full of customers that we're trying to reach. And traditionally what we do is we try and measure this through things like demographics or psychographics. You know, a lot of the sort of 25, 54 type of male or female with a high household income, it's that kind of thing that we're typically marketing to, and sort of when we create these brand personas. And what I suggest is that there's a better way to do this. And it's not that the segmentation of the market is wrong. I think it's a really good idea. I think it's a much better idea than just targeting the entire market, but it's really how you segment. And so the share of trigger idea is really about understanding what the triggers are that initiate a consumer's buying journey, instead of just grouping them by age, demo, that kind of thing, is grouping them by the thing that starts their journey. And so it doesn't matter how old the person is. It doesn't matter. You've heard things like stages, not ages, I'm sure, in the past. And so people who start a journey and the reasons why they start a journey is something we can measure, and it's a way that we can make brand campaigns a lot better. So let me start by giving you a bit of a short story. And I think you're probably going to have some sympathy or empathy with this story. So we're getting really close to the beginning of the year. Probably a whole bunch of you are going through marketing planning sessions right now, talking about 2021 planning. You know, budgets is a big conversation, you know, aligning projects and all that kind of stuff. And there's generally a lot of excitement at this time of the year, because you're kind of thinking forward, you're thinking to the future. And, you know, as we get into the new year, there's a sort of sense of optimism. You know, we've got all these things lined up, and we're going to do this in January and this in February, or this in week 68 or sorry, 46, or whatever the thing is in the year. And we've aligned everybody to these sort of ideals. Now, what happens typically is once you hit the new year, you end up having this sort of facepalm moment where you're like, what happened? We had this all perfectly planned out. And then inevitably something, you know, you don't hit sales targets. So-and-so executive says, no, we've got to do a special project. I need money from the marketing department to put into this project. You know, there's a whole host of things that come up. And so the plans you had really well laid out and very well prescribed for the course of the year end up getting changed, which ultimately isn't a bad thing. It's something we could think about. But there's one thing that often happens, and you may have seen this, when there is a cut or when there is a shift, there's a place that people look for when they're trying to take budget. And it typically is in the things that they can't count. And brand campaigns and sometimes research fall into that category. And ultimately what I think people are looking for is, you know, tell me what things are going to drive an ROI for the business. And then let's talk about saving those budgets and saving those activations. And anything that doesn't prove an ROI ends up getting cut. And so what we quickly realize is that budgets are not infinite. In fact, we have a very limited amount of budget. And ultimately what we're trying to do is build campaigns that are going to actually create an impact. And for brand campaigns specifically, if we believe that it's going to drive long-term growth, then we need a language and we need a framework and we need some ideas around how to actually communicate that to everyone in a way that's believable. And if we don't, we often end up being labeled as the coloring department, which is really frustrating. It's really personally offensive to me, because I really believe in what marketing is and what it does and creating market demand for businesses and products and services. And so, you know, being labeled that sort of coloring department it's a really frustrating thing. And so throughout my entire career, I've always been trying to find ways to help reposition branding and marketing. And so what I ultimately would really like to do is change the conversation from marketing being an expense to being an investment. Sorry, I'm just gonna grab a glass of water. So that's the story to set this up. And really, when we get into the trouble with branding, there's a definition just to level set everybody. I know there's a lot of us on the call and we all have various versions of what branding is. But I think this is a really good description. And so branding, I would say, is the art and science of influencing perception about a product, service, or an organization. A brand is a little bit different in that It's that, you know, I've heard great examples of, it's that gut feeling that people have about you. It's what they say when you're not in the room. And so brand is a little bit different, but branding, that action-oriented phrase or the action-oriented word, is about how we influence people to think and feel about us and our companies. Now, we've also seen, probably a lot of you have seen this diagram as well. So this is a classic study that came out a few years ago from Les Binet and Peter Field. And basically what they're saying is that there's really kind of two types of activations or campaigns that they've been able to record. There's one which is labeled as short-termism or short-term activations, which is those campaigns that you see all the time. It's the discount, it's the promo, it's the BOGO, it's those kinds of types of activations. And that's the yellow lines there. And there's a general growing trend over time that more and more companies are heading towards these short-term activations, because really they work. I mean, they drive short-term sales. When you're trying to hit comps today, or you're trying to hit your sales targets this month, or you're trying to reach the quarterly targets, you know, or the year, these types of campaigns that incentivize the action, which is the purchase often that we're looking for, you know, providing a discount, decreasing friction by making it easier and seamless to sort of make that purchase, so you don't have to think a lot about it. Reduces our profits, but also drives the bottom line. And so often that's what the thing is that we default to. Brand campaigns, on the other hand, is that orange line. And we all believe that this is the kind of thing that drives growth, sustainable long-term growth, and differentiates companies. And that is all true. But the time scales that they work on are totally different. And that's a big challenge with brand campaigns, is that you're looking at 6, 12, 18 months instead of the 6, 12, 18 hours that everybody wants to see there's returns in. So, you know, like we see this type of thing all the time where it's so easy to think, okay, we'll put stimulus in the market and we'll see the cash register ring or whatever the result is that you're looking for. And we know that it's not that simple, especially when you get into digital, even in e-com scenarios where you've got, you know, a direct line of view in terms of where people purchase and how much they purchase. But even at that, I know one of my friends is on the call, Nav, we used to work together. He was at Facebook, and that was like always a conversation that we had where Facebook doesn't like to share data with Google, and Google doesn't like to share data with Facebook. And so you run into these situations of, well, who gets the credit? And so even in the scenario of an online purchase, it's really difficult to like see into that black box to really understand what it is that's driving that action, you know, even right back to the beginning. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to refer to McDonald's just to use as an example. And there's a lot of reasons for it. I'm not a huge McDonald's fan by any stretch. I can't even remember the last time I ate McDonald's, but it's just a brand that everybody knows and has had some kind of experience with. And really, there's a lot of data as well that's available publicly with McDonald's. So I'm just going to use them as a frame of reference, but this really applies to all companies, big and small, and we can talk about that. And if that's any question that somebody has, then I'm happy to answer that. When we talk about branding, again, going back to the trouble branding, we often talk about this idea of like there's a category, in this case, McDonald's, it's fast food restaurants or quick service restaurants, and then the brand. And so the idea there is really around trying to differentiate and dominate in that category. So we want to own the fast food restaurant, or we want to own the phone market, we want to own the car market. And so, you know, we use metrics like awareness and consideration and intent to try and measure the lift that we get from these brand campaigns in those particular categories. You know, awareness, this is a really, really typical campaign question or a brand lift question that you would get. So have you heard of McDonald's? But you could use any company or brand here. Have you heard of company X, or have you heard of service Y, or whatever the thing is? And so we measure and track that over time. And as you know, in a graph like that, you feel really good about it because it's going up and to the right. Consideration, how likely are you to consider McDonald's when you're choosing your next restaurant? And the same thing with intent. How likely are you to purchase McDonald's in the next 30 days? And so there's nothing wrong with these questions. They're really good. It kind of gives you a scope of the things that are happening in the market, but it's not very specific and it's not very actionable, other than to say, well, we're trying to actually just max out our awareness or max out our consideration or max out our intent, but it doesn't really give you much more than that. You see some of this, you know, when you present these kind of findings in an executive table, a boardroom table, and you find, you know, there's this person, you're looking at this, well, in this particular case, there's this guy here saying, I don't see a brand of pickle relish anywhere. And this guy going, this is impossible. This is a brand loyalist, but inside the customer's head, there's actually nothing there that references the brand of pickle relish that they've been advertising for so long. And what that suggests to me is that, you know, it's pretty accurate, I think, in a lot of ways, and that people, and particularly our customers, think of a lot of things. They don't think in terms of categories. They think in terms of like need states. And there's memories that they associate with particular need states. And really, when I get into share triggers, that's what I'm trying to talk about. Is it's not about blanket brand awareness. It's about being linked to a particular need state. Again, the trouble with branding. So there's this guy. He's super famous, even though you may not recognize him. He's probably one of the most famous people in the world. If it was live, I'd say, anybody know who this is? But I'll just say, anyone know who this is? So this is Elias St. Elmo Lewis, if you hadn't guessed. But he's the guy that literally invented the sales and marketing funnel that we all use and we all talk about. So literally in 1898, he came up with this framework or this model for how people go through their purchase journeys. So awareness, interest, decision, action, you know, top of mind awareness, bottom of the funnel, all those kinds of languages that we use all the time. Literally, it's from a model that was built over 100 years ago. And it's been super helpful, but like all models, it's wrong. But it's super useful. And so, but part of that is really shaped how we think. And so when we measure awareness, consideration, intent, those brand lift metrics, it's really around because of the sales and marketing funnel. We're trying to measure the sort of the breadth of the awareness funnel. We're trying to measure all the people that are in consideration, and then quantify with the intent section what the next 30, 69 days would look like in terms of the potential market impact. You know, when we talk about that, first we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us, you know, that sales and marketing funnel really has shaped us as marketers in the way we think often. Fast forward 111 years, it's funny to say that out loud, but McKinsey and Company comes out with this consumer decision journey, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But it really ties up nicely to the brand, the sales and marketing funnel, because this initial consideration set is almost exactly the same thing as the awareness section. Active evaluation phase, that's really a lot of like the intent and decision. And then the moment of purchase is really that action point. What's new and different here is the post-purchase experience, the loyalty loop. And there's this little thing here in pink that I really never spent a whole lot of time thinking about. And again, when we talk about sort of the way that we measure brand campaigns, it really fits nicely. Like there's a really seamless transition going from the sales and marketing funnel to the consumer decision journey. And so we just naturally apply our brand lift metrics to this, and it fits really well. And it's really simple to kind of keep our conversation around how we build marketing and brand campaigns going. Which led me to this moment earlier this year. Just around the beginning of summer, just before Stampede, I had this epiphany. And I swear to God, I felt like Jacques Cousteau, like I discovered some deep sea creature or something. And it's this trigger. And I honestly realized that I had never really spent a whole lot of time thinking about the trigger. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that I got into this past summer. And I spent a lot of time thinking about triggers and how we could use them to be predictive instead of responsive and reactive. How we could use them to help us measure, and how we could help them understand our customers better. So when we go back to that idea around tools shape us, I just want to show you this and play a little game with you. So the goal here is to look and count at how many times the team in white shirts passes the ball. So if you know, don't tell anybody else, because this is a really fun thing. But I'm going to hit play. It'll probably take a second to load this. So give me a second. Okay, so the thing is, you're going to count the number of times the team with the white shirts passes the ball to each other. Did you get it? So I kind of knew the answer, and I ended up counting 13, but I was so focused on this. But here's the funny part. Okay, so this is the part where I knew this was happening. I knew there was a moonwalking bear, and I didn't see him at all when I did this. Here comes the moonwalking bear. So this is a really good example. There's a classic example that's used a lot in psychology. And the whole point there is that if you're not looking for something, or if you're so fixated on another thing, you sometimes miss the things that are right in front of you. And that's how I felt about triggers. And I think, so when we talk about triggers, it's really this event or a circumstance that's the cause of a particular action or process. In other words, it's really the thing that starts a consumer's journey to down their path to purchase. And that doesn't matter how old they are. It doesn't matter what their age is. I mean, that's maybe some influence, but really there's a real need that somebody has that starts their journey. And that's the thing that I think is really important. The other thing that I had measured or realized is that I had been looking at this as two-dimensional. So the consumer decision journey, I looked at it as a static thing that's 2D. And what I realized is that there wasn't just one person making a journey to purchase. There's a lot of people, and all of those people have different reasons to start that journey. And so the market isn't one person, it isn't one particular group. It isn't a 25 to 54-year-old female. It isn't a 18 to 32-year-old guy. It's really a whole bunch. It's made up of a whole bunch of triggers that start people down their path to purchase. And the cool part is we can actually measure that, going back to what I had started at the beginning. What's even cooler is that there's a ton of research around this. There's so much data science and behavioral science and all kinds of information that you can get into that talk about this. Now, share a trigger I'm using that because of the consumer decision journey and the language there that triggers how McKinsey described it. But the Ehrenberg Bass Institute and some of the work they've done, they've published a lot of stuff around category entry points. So if you think about, another analogy would be there's a beachhead and you want to land on that beachhead. It's all those individual landing points on the beachhead that we're talking about. And so, I got even more excited going into all this science because it's not something I'm making up, which is even better. Like there's a ton of great information and research around this. And so the idea here is that rather than spending on brand awareness, just broad general brand awareness, our goal in my mind is to build memory links to the triggers with the highest growth potential. And so by doing that, it allows us to change the conversations that we have in the boardrooms to when we're trying to figure out how to defend and make a case for our budgets. So modern brand management then, what does that look like? I think in the past, it's really been around sort of building general awareness, putting a campaign, putting it on TV, buying mostly GRPs you can. Fast forward a few years, it's building a campaign, building creative, buying as many views as you can, that kind of thing, or impressions and all that. And so ultimately, I think that's wrong now, especially when you've got finite budgets, when you're expected to deliver a return. I think that it's great that we are expected to deliver a return because we're trying to be more scientific, more impactful with the money and the investments that we have. And so rather than sort of trying to throw a net over the entire ocean, what I'm suggesting again is that we be more specific, that we order the colors a little bit more. We put a more structure to that coloring department that we were in before. These things are not new, being customer centric, being data driven, being measurable, being repeatable. But I think that is even more true and more important for brand campaigns because they occupy such a big portion of our budget. And our investments and our resources, that it's really important that we consider how to do that, these four things with brand campaigns. So if we were to go down this path, I started thinking, well, what are the right things that we would need to do to create a framework around this? So it would have to be easy to track is the first thing. We'd have to be able to better diagnose growth opportunities within the market. We'd have to be able to reduce wasted spend and improve budget efficiency. We'd have to really try and find a way that would help us diagnose what kind of creative is going to have the most impact. And then we'd also really want to try and find a way that we can connect the brand marketing to specific measurable ROIs. And so I thought if we can do those things, if we can create a framework around how manage and build brand campaigns, then it's a lot more like, you know, throwing a really strong punch. I took boxing for a little while and I have a soft head, so I didn't actually spar with people, except on occasion accidentally you get punched. But when you know how to throw a punch, man, does it really hurt. And so you can throw, if we do and use these tools to allow us like to better focus our energy and our efforts on making a significant impact, we can really do that for the businesses that we work in. And so I think the modern version of brand management is really around building and managing memory links between profitable triggers and our product, services, and organizations. So it's not that broad scope campaign. It's really trying to find ways that we can build and manage between the triggers that are most strategic importance for the companies and the brands and the services and the solutions that we have for our customers. When we look at some of the science that's out there, there's, you know, we talked about categories in the past, and really this is an example of how McDonald's associative network works. So awareness overall doesn't come from McDonald's being broadly aware. It comes from them owning and refreshing the memory links between these specific categories. And this is the way that people think about it. And when you think back to that cartoon we saw before with the pickle stuff, I mean, people have needs. There's kids' family fun. There's a social involvement. There's a service aspect, clean, fast, convenient. There's value. They're looking at the actual meals. Like, it's not even sometimes just the meals that people pick. You know, the products that are available, the brands. And so all those things are things that the modern brand manager has to actually build and refresh memory links to. And so if you can do that in a way that's powerful and impactful, and you can allocate the resources to the places that matter most, then you'll build this sort of broad general awareness. But it's not, you don't go from broad to being specific. You have to go from specific to being broad. So, you know, it's just a, you know, if, you know, perfect world, you would have 100% market share of your brand, where you have all the triggers mapped out, and you could look at how your brand links to each one of those triggers, and you could measure that easily over time. I'll get into that in a second. But let me get into the trigger framework. And I know the marketplace, again, I'm using McDonald's just as an example, but the marketplace is much more complicated than what I'm going to show you here. But that's where, like, a lot of the research and some of the work that, you know, companies like ours and other people out there would do, and that's where they can help guide you. Again, let's take a look at the market overall. If we were to take all the people in the market, we could then survey them and say, okay, what are the most common reasons that you choose a fast food restaurant? After doing our survey, we found 35% of the people that we surveyed, again, this is not real data, this is just, you know, illustrative to make the point. But we found that 35% of the people said that they were hungry and they wanted a burger. 24% said they were hungry and they needed something fast and they delivered. 12% said they were hungry, they need some greasy breakfast. 10% that they were on the road, they just wanted to trust what they're getting. 8% said they needed a place to entertain the kids. 7% said they needed to pick me up and they wanted some coffee. And then the last bit just said they had a sweet craving and they wanted a treat. So what does that do for us? Well, nothing really, until you start realizing that, you know, you can have this conversation within the you know, executive room or the board table or within your marketing team, and say, well, what are the triggers that are most important for us? Strategically speaking, in the case of McDonald's, you know, let's say we're all on the same team. We just came out of a meeting. We said, okay, well, you know, for us right now, hungry and I want a burger, it makes a ton of sense because we have so many burgers on our menu. Like, that's what we serve. So that let's figure out that part. And the second part, we say, well, hungry needs something fast and they deliver. That was actually a really important part for us too. Yeah, these other ones we don't feel are really strategic importance, and so we're going to ignore those for now. But this is great. So we've got, you know, triggers identified, and we've got a strategic priority that's identified. Similar to the other studies, you know, we can start tracking this over time. So based on the strategic priorities, we said, okay, well, hungry, I want a burger. That's trigger number one. That's like huge importance for us. And there's some variability quarter over quarter, but relatively, it's very stable. And so, you know, the market this year at least has really said that that's the number one trigger in the market. So, you know, for us, really important to put some priority and energy and consideration there. The second one, and I put this in here intentionally because of COVID, but you could see that in this particular case, you may be able to measure market for sure you'd be able to measure market changes because of things like the environment. So COVID happens in March. In this particular case, we see this massive spike that for fast food, and they deliver specifically. So we can look at that and go, okay, well, that's really interesting. That's a huge growing opportunity for us. But that's not necessarily the end of the story. It's just really like a bit of a diagnosis as to where we should look and dig more deeper. That's not really great English, but you get what I'm saying. We can dig deeper. So with those two metrics, we can say that, yes, this is actually easy to track. It's a really simple thing to do. For any small business that may be listening, really it's the question that you ask, what brought you in today, to your store or your shop or your restaurant or whatever the case may be. If you just record that stuff over time, you can start understanding what those triggers are and build out that database. For everyone else that works at a larger organization, you can put those messages in the market and in the survey format, and you can get all this information. So it's really great because it's easy to track, and it will help diagnose growth opportunities like we found with that hungry and I want something fast. So the second part, though, is really super interesting because then you can compare to your own brand to the competitors. And so when you think about insert trigger here, which brand first comes to mind? And so again, we went back to the market and we said, okay, well, let's say for the first trigger, hungry and I want a burger. So we found that McDonald's was actually the #1 choice. Second and tied for second place was A&W and Burger King. So, okay, we could say a lot about that, but yay, we're #1. So that's great. And we can keep our eyes on their competitors in that case. In the other trigger category, we can look at McDonald's and find out, that we're in third place, that A&W actually has much more of the share of mind than we do with that particular trigger, and same thing with Burger King. And so we could look at that as, we know that it's an important trigger. We've decided it's a strategic priority. And when it comes to the brand link, we know we're in third. So that's a huge growth opportunity for us. So when we talk about building brand campaigns with this kind of data, then we can pinpoint on ways that we can reduce wasted spend, improve our budget efficiency. But then also when we talk about creative impact, we know exactly what the messaging is that we want to drive home because we've identified it already. So it helps us guide sort of all the creative strategic briefs as well. And then through this, then you can build this really cool brand action plan. And so this brand action plan, we can look at it based on the trigger, which is on the left-hand side, the CDJ stage. We can look at all known triggers that initiate products decisions, and I summarize it just to the two that were most important here. But hungry, I want a burger, and hungry, I need something fast, and they deliver. We know that the share of trigger in Q3 was 35% for the first one, 24% the second one. We know that we're lagging. It's a really big opportunity for us on the second category, the fast and they deliver. And in both cases, we knew that the business priority is very high. So for the action plan, then going into Q4, and this is just quarterly, but you could look at this as a semi-annual or an annual, depending on how often you want to run these surveys. We can build out this plan around, well, let's maintain that for the burger one. We're doing really well. We're the top choice. We don't want to come off the gas entirely because, we don't want to lose ground to the competitors, but we don't have to increase our spend there either. On the second category, we know that it's a growing category from a share of trigger point of view, and that we can then, and we're in third place in terms of like the top choice. And so we can then start building creative in day party media to make sure that people know as they go into breakfast or they go into lunch or they go into dinner, that those are really important times when people are making decisions, and we can target our media specifically with real creative that's going to address that need state, and with the timing and the platforms that are going to make a difference. And so with that, then we're also able to connect the brand marketing to measurable ROI, because we're trying to drive penetration within the market. It's not just about broad awareness at this point. It's specifically about a particular goal in mind. So I have a few final thoughts, and then we can get into some Q&A, and I hope if anybody's got any questions, feel free to fire away. But really share triggers in my mind is a really important way to think about investing in market penetration. It's not just about brand awareness in totality. It's about being specific about where there's opportunities and driving growth there, customer acquisition. There's this great quote from David Ogilvy. And so I really enjoyed reading this quote, and it just fit perfectly with the share of triggers idea, and that a good advertisement can be thought of as a radar sweep, hunting new prospects as they come into market. Get a good radar and keep it sweeping. And so from that perspective, I really think the share trigger methodology is that radar sweep. It's a thing that helps you see what's happening in the market, seeing where there's opportunity, seeing where you've got a competitive advantage or where you have a competitive disadvantage, and trying to figure out holistically the best way to attract or attack that part of the market. And finally, really my big goal, my big vision here for pretty much everything I do is to help people in marketing, from the CMO right down to the project coordinator, with frameworks or ideas and data, insights and language, and ultimately the confidence to be able to defend budgets and provide really helpful information to their companies so that they can help those companies grow. And maybe, even just maybe, throw a little less shit against the wall than what we've been doing in the past. And I think if we can do that, then what we're ultimately doing is helping transform marketing from being that expense center into an investment center and driving business growth. And with that, I think I'm done. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I am hungry for burgers and can't get my mind off of the dancing, moonwalking bears.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a lot of information in a very short period of time. So thank you for consolidating some really large thought processes into this presentation. We do have a few questions, so I'm just going to jump straight into the first one and just go through them. David Louis has said, hello and great presentation. How do you go about in allocating your marketing spend for your campaign along the funnel?
Mm-hmm.
Is that standard and then you are ready to adjust, or do you have to just stay fluid?
Yeah, so the Binet and Field study provided some insights into that. And so what they found through their research is that there's a spectrum, and every industry is going to be a little bit different. I mean, in general, what they would say is, like, consider putting 50 to 60% of your budget into brand marketing and 50 to 60, and the remainder into tactical marketing. So if you think about all the different stages within the consumer decision journey, there's sort of the early stage, like the awareness, initial consideration set, and then in the active evaluation phase, you want to be able to reach customers there as well. And then also in the purchase phase, the things that also are invisible to a lot of marketers, myself included, is that, because the sales and marketing funnel, we think about those particular stages, I think, awareness, intent, desire, and action. And often we forget about the post-purchase experience and the loyalty experience. Loyalty maybe a bit more, but less so on the post-purchase experience. And so from looking at the marketing of the consumer journey in totality, I think it's practical to think about how you could divide that up across the entire journey, not just in the top half or in the sales and marketing funnel. But in short, I would say, thinking about a pretty even spend between the sales and marketing activation type of events or activities and budget, and then the brand building aspects of it as well.
And you're always looking, I mean, once you've gone through the cycle, then you have to review and readjust, correct? Because there's the whole mouth and the influencers, that whole piece that social media has created of all the after sell, eh?
Yeah.
Claire is asking, once again, great presentation, Mark. Is there a way you can identify customer triggers without holding a focus group or sending out a survey? Coming from a B2B organization, I find it cheesy to spam clients with surveys, and even if we do, the response rate is incredibly low. So how else do we gather our data?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think in some ways, this is where marketing needs to integrate with other teams, maybe. And so a business development team or a sales team, they really are such a rich resource of information and insights, because they're the ones that often are the ones face to face with the customer, and the ones that are trying to work through the objection handling and talking about like what the problems and the challenges are and finding a way to fit their solution into that business, the B2B environment. And so, even just a matter of like connecting on a frequent basis with the sales and marketing or the sales team or the business development team can be so powerful to get that information. You could also look at things like customer service team, even, depending on how much data and information they have. Some of the things that we've been doing with a few of our clients is actually giving the sales team or giving the business development team questions that they can ask, and then they record those questions like we talked about here with shared triggers. So that then, we can create a regular reporting cadence. So some of the information coming from that sales or the business development team is actually being filtered through to us, as an ongoing thing. And then from that, we were able to adjust and tweak creative messaging based on the new things that we're learning from the actual customers.
Okay, so Dan is asking, do you see any opportunities for marketing automation and personalization in the brand management process, in particular when you're focused on triggers?
I do, and I think so. So one-on-one marketing. I mean, I have a lot of opinions about that. One thing I would say is, I think when you're looking at one-on-one marketing or looking at personalization, the objective isn't personalization. The objective is relevance. And so we're trying to create one-on-one marketing because what we're trying to say is we want to be relevant to that person. So that's the totally fair statement. When it comes to triggers, it's 100% about relevance. It's 100% about like understanding people and their need states and then building creative around that. Some of the biggest campaigns in the world, like Super Bowl ads, are some of the most relevant campaigns in the world, but they're not one-to-one. They're all about mass, but they're specific to trying to address a need state or address like a particular problem or just entertain people. And so, I would shy away from the idea of like one-to-one being the objective. And, if you think about relevance as the objective, then I think this trigger framework is a perfect fit with that idea.
Okay. There was a question about, Mark, are you located in Calgary? And the answer is yes, you are based in Calgary.
Or online, which is anywhere.
Yeah, or anywhere in the world now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this excellent presentation. I really enjoy the pragmatism of your perspective. How is this McDonald's campaign concept different from running a business building campaign that supports a key brand message?
Yeah, so there's, U&A studies like usage and acceptance studies, there's driver analysis studies that are done. And, ultimately what this share of triggers does is there's a lot of similarities and overlap. What I'm trying to do is rather than recreate something brand new every single time with, there's an idea out there, I want to use the frameworks that are in mind. And that's like something that is, I think part of the reason why the sales and marketing funnel became so adopted, I should say, is because it's simplicity and people could understand it and they could explain it. And even if you weren't in marketing, you kind of get the idea of it. And so the share trigger thing is, as I mentioned before, it's similar to the category entry points. It's different from things like driver analysis. It's a little bit different from things like the U&A studies. Part of it is that when you're running a brand campaign that supports a key brand message, I'm not saying that we're not supporting a key brand message. Share of triggers actually is exactly that. It's just the way that we find what that key brand message should be is through share of triggers instead of just, spitballing and trying to do something outrageous just to try and capture people's attention because they're 6 seconds long and all those kinds of things. It's really about trying to understand customers and the reasons why they're starting their journey as opposed to just trying to outspend or outvoice other competitors in the market.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but happy to chat more about that one.
Okay, so Jennifer, if you have any more questions, just or would like a follow-up, just please reach out to us. No, Jennifer says excellent explanation. So thank you for that. We don't have any more questions coming up right now from our audience. So I have a question around, so is this, this is very new, your concept. You came up with it in July, right? I mean, it's been
Well,
ruminating. Have you been using this? Have you been presenting this to your clients? And if so, are they catching on quickly, or is it going to take like a bit of adjustment, you know, in thought processes? And we've been talking a lot about culture over the last little while. Is this something more subtle, or does it actually require kind of a change, a bigger thought process change?
well, so it's new to me, but it's one of those things where I was like, "Holy cow, this has been here forever!" Like this giant squid in the ocean. Like, it's
The
not, it's not new.
bear.
Yeah, yeah. I really should have put a Jacques Cousteau picture in the slide deck, but it's not new. Like that's the crazy part that like I legitimately have never heard of this before. But once I kind of started making the connection and sort of putting dots together, I realized there's this wealth of information out there. And as I mentioned, like Byron Sharp is one of the guys that has done a ton of work on this. And so if anyone's interested, his books are unbelievable. He's got lots of publications in literature. I don't mean like fiction literature. I mean like academic research and stuff like that. There's tons of really, really great stuff there. And it's a very rich history within this sort of field of science. And so, as I said, it's new to me. And when I've been talking about it with clients, I mean, once I've figured out a way to explain it that was somewhat hopefully understandable, like you guys heard today, I find the clients are super receptive to it. And I get really excited about it because rather than saying, let's build a brand campaign and, you know, because we want to get more awareness, there's a reason why. And I can tell them, you're not just investing in broad awareness, you're investing in like a specific thing. And we're going to try and drive action this way. And we can measure that down the line. You know, when we talk about what kinds of clients we're getting, what are they asking for? What are the uses that they're using your product for? And so for a lot of clients, they've been really excited about it because I think for them, there's a bit of a light bulb moment as well.
Right. So one of the statements that you made, which I wrote down, the path to purchase is made up of a whole bunch of triggers. Will the triggers change? I mean, I'm going back to this whole fluidity thing. You know, like I worked for a large corporation, and we would create a 5-year plan and a 3-year plan and a 2-year plan, or sorry, 3-year plan and a 6-month plan, and then every 6 months we would adjust the plan. I'm assuming the triggers are like that too. Like you set your triggers, and then depending, you measure the results, and then you have to shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that's part of the idea about that radar sweep too that Ogilvy had talked about, where you know, people are dynamic. I mean, if you had asked any of us this time last year what we'd be doing in this time this year, you know, that we'd all be sitting in our basement offices and things like that, none of us would have guessed that. And so, you know, really that's the whole point about understanding customers and businesses. Ultimately, their goal is to sort of serve people rather than like just force people to buy what they have to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, there isn't like necessarily an on-off switch, but business innovation happens over time. You know, you see that, you know, for anybody that's read the book Good to Great, you know, that example that they talk about and the sort of the timelines they talk about going from good to great is 10 years. So, you know, the example I've used before is like, you know, everybody uses Steve Jobs and Apple, but Steve Jobs came back and I think it was 97, and 10 years later, they came out with the iPhone. So, you know, if you talk about they were good at that time, but then they really became great. And, you know, I think a lot of that is just that business systems and processes are always going to be in a reactive state to the market dynamics and the market changes. And so putting this sort of share of trigger feeler into the market and scanning,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the radar sweep helps businesses really truly understand what's happening in the market from the point of view of not just like adults 25-54, because that really doesn't change that much. But it's really the trigger that initiates that purchase journey. And if we can understand that, then I think we have a way better chance at making businesses become more innovative and more adaptive and more agile to the changes in the market.
Yeah, very true. And you know, you're absolutely right about this whole COVID thing, triggers are totally different. I mean, I'm thinking of airlines, for example. I mean, this time last year from WestJet, for example, I was getting emails on a regular basis convincing me to book my flights because they know that I go away every year at New Year's. And so book your flights, book your flight. Now I'm getting a series of emails saying like, trust us, our airplanes are disinfected. Trust us, we will
Yeah.
get, we're introducing COVID insurance. Trust us. So it's gone from, hey, book your flights before we sell out to, hey, here are the things that we can tell you to keep you calm, and so that you will be willing to, or have the confidence to get on our airplanes.
Sure.
Always shifting, always
Yeah,
shifting.
for sure.
Okay,
Totally.
so we have a couple of minutes left. If anybody else has a final question or comment that they would like to share, please type them out. Otherwise, like I said, a few minutes left. Any last words? Any thoughts, Mark?
No, I mean, I don't know if you can do this, but if anybody that's still on, if you can flip it to gallery view and have everyone chat, then happy to
Yeah, I can't do
talk.
that because it's a webinar versus
Oh,
a,
I see.
yeah, unfortunately. So,
Okay,
but
no problem.
Ada just said, awesome presentation. Thanks, Mark. So there we go.
Awesome.
Now like I said, this presentation is recorded. So all of you who registered, we will be sending a link to this on our YouTube channel out in the next, actually it won't be on our YouTube channel. It'll just be a link in the next, we always try to get it out within 24 hours. And then while I'm just waiting to see if we have any other questions come in, I'd love to just tell you about what else we have coming up. On September 29th, we have a gentleman named Greg White coming in to speak to our, like webinaring in to speak to us, coming into our homes. And he is going to be speaking about enhancing your e-commerce. And this is how to develop a communications to convince consumers to buy your product, and how shoppers shop is often misaligned. So they've had their aha moment, and Greg is going to kind of walk us through the principles behind how most of our purchase decisions are made, and why communication consistently is so important. So you'll be receiving emails about that, and you can also always go to our events page. We have not only our own CMA events, but we also have community events as well. And if you do have a webinar that you want to put on, please just go to our events page and fill out the form. And if it's a marketing related event, we will get that up for you. Also very excited, we did have for a little while, we were going to do a live event on October 22nd. We were going to have a panel of subject matter experts moderated by yours truly, Mark. The presentation was called Marketing Reboot, What's Next? But we have moved it online. So we will not be holding any live presentations for the rest of the year. But I'm really looking forward to this October 22nd panel, because we have Brad Perry, who's VP Marketing and Comm of Calgary Economic Development. We have Jeff Lowe, who's the EVP, Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Human Resource Officer of Smart Technologies. We have John Pieri, VP of Marketing Brand at ATB, and we have Tanis Gaffney, VP Destination and Promotion at Travel Alberta. So these subject matter experts are going to share what it is that they have been going through, you know, when everyone started to hear about this in January, and their lives. Like, these are examples of folks within organizations whose lives have changed so drastically as far as where we're going, and how, where marketing is, and how, you know, the word pivot keeps coming up, but how priorities have had to change through this COVID. And then hopefully be able to talk a little bit about what's coming next. Our goal is to bring to you a webinar every 2 weeks. So we are working on some fantastic subject matter experts. We'll have October solidified, I think, in the next week. And then we're even into November now. It looks like we're going to have Hilton Barber, speaking on November 10th, and Jeff Lowe will be coming in to talk a little bit with Hilton about that. I think we're going to have someone from Canada Post coming in November to talk about their marketing and how to balance out convincing people to use your product when you are having a real tough time getting that product processed and out to the last mile. So lots and lots of, like I said, relevant. We're always looking for relevant information, timely information, and pieces of marketing intelligence that will be helpful to you, our marketing audience. Anything else to add, Mark, before we sign off, or can we bid everyone adieu and hopefully see?
Yeah, no. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn mostly and email. So feel free to connect.
Yep, and you can find us also, you can find Mark on our website because he's on our board of directors. So once again, just head on back to the CMA website, look at our board of directors page. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Mark. I know you're incredibly busy these days, so I really appreciate you taking that amazing information and boiling it down to a 35-minute presentation for us. So appreciate it.
It was really fun to do. Thanks.
All right. Once again, everyone, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again real soon. Okay. Bye.